So when you first learn about ser versus estar in Spanish, you'll encounter a set of rules for ser and a set of rules for estar. Now, one problem is that the list of rules you come across is not always consistent. Various teachers and books will teach it in different ways. But the main problem is the act of thinking about a rule will slow you down and make your Spanish less fluent. Now, this can be tricky to overcome, but at the end of this video, you'll have a solid understanding of how you can improve your thinking with ser and estar. So let's get started. Vamos. Now, there is a common rule that students learn with ser and estar. Ser is for permanent characteristics and estar is for temporary characteristics. Now, the first exception to that rule that students learn is that we can often use estar for location. So if I say, I'm at home, estoy en casa, or where are you, ¿dónde estás? This makes sense. My location and your location are temporary since we can move around. But then we find, where is the bathroom? ¿Dónde está el baño? Or even, Quito is in Ecuador, Quito está en Ecuador. Now, we could move a bathroom around by renovating, but Quito as a city is unlikely to move from its current location for hundreds, if not thousands of years. So trying to connect permanent and temporary to examples like these can cause confusion, but it's also mental work that we don't need to do. We don't need to spend any time considering how temporary our location is or the location of a city. Instead, we need to practice Estoy en casa. ¿Dónde estás? ¿Dónde está el baño? Quito está en Ecuador. Now, looking at this list, it's tempting to think that we can always use estar with location, so we could consider this another rule. But then we find examples like this. Where is Roberta's funeral? ¿Dónde es el funeral de Roberta?
¿Dónde es el funeral de Roberta?
And where is the wedding? ¿Dónde es la boda? Now, this suggests that the new rule could be estar for location except for events. But then we find the party is in the garden, la fiesta está en el jardín.
La fiesta está en el jardín.
And so it turns out that with parties, we can use both. ¿Dónde es la fiesta? ¿Dónde está la fiesta? Now, there is a subtle change in meaning here. ¿Dónde es la fiesta? Is asking about the logistics of how to get to the party. A response to this question could be, the party is at Paco's house. La fiesta es en la casa de Paco. Or simply just to confirm a location. But now the party's at your house? Pero ahora la fiesta es en tu casa?
Pero que ahora la fiesta es en tu casa?
Whereas ¿dónde está la fiesta? Can often be more of a rhetorical question with the purpose of getting a party started. Like, imagine you get to a party and it's not exactly going off the way you were hoping it would. Hola, ¿qué tal? Estoy aquí. ¿Qué pasa? Oye, ¿dónde está la fiesta? So now this suggests that the new rule could be estar with location except for events, except when the event is a party. Then we can use both ser and estar with a subtle change in meaning. But then you'll find examples like this. Your house is that way. Tu casa es por ahí.
Tu casa es por ahí.
And we have, ma'am, the exit is that way. Señorita, la salida está por ahí.
Señorita, la salida está por ahí.
So this now suggests that the rule could be estar with location except for events, except when the event is a party. Then we can use both ser and estar with a subtle change in meaning. Except when we're pointing out a direction, then we can use both ser and estar without a subtle change in meaning. Now, I hope you can see the point I'm trying to make in a not so subtle way. The rules are difficult to define. And it's not just ser and estar, and it's not just Spanish. Languages in general have parts that are complex and often not logical. And as a Spanish teacher, I like to introduce the topic of ser versus estar by making a comparison to make versus do in English, because we can also find similar complexity and illogical patterns. Now, English schools often teach that make is for creation and do is for tasks. And then you come across examples like this. Do housework, make your bed. Do exercise, make an effort. Do time, and make time. Now, these last two in particular are really hard to figure out from the logic of tasks and creation. Like, what is the task of doing time? It's not obvious that this means spending time in prison. And what's worse is that hacer tiempo in Spanish actually means to kill time. So if you're a Spanish native, good luck figuring out the logic of do time and make time. Now, if you're an English native like me, you may never have thought about the logic of make and do, and whether make the bed is an exception to a rule or not. You've probably just heard and used the phrase make the bed hundreds of times without thinking about the logic. And this is what we need to do with ser and estar. We just need to say over and over, es por ahí, está por ahí. and then not wonder if this is an exception to a rule. It's just a pattern that we can get used to. I also hope that you can see that it's easier to practice and remember ¿Dónde es la boda? ¿Dónde está el baño? Than it is to remember and process the rule from earlier when we're trying to speak Spanish. Now, another example that I've received a ton of questions about over the years is he is dead. Él está muerto. Now, students often ask about this because it seems to break the permanent and temporary rule. But I always encourage students to try to let go of the rule because it helps us to avoid doing mental gymnastics to get to an answer. We want to be able to go straight to the sentence. Él está muerto. Now, we can do this by practicing this sentence over and over. Él está muerto. Él está muerto. Rather than searching for a logic framework that this sentence fits into. Now, I understand why students want a simple framework. It means we'll be able to predict situations with ser and estar that we've never seen before. But the purpose of this video is to show you that for many of the uses and meaning changes with ser and estar, they're near impossible to predict. For example, we have situations where we can use both ser and estar with a change in meaning, and similar to the party example, the change in meaning is not so obvious. For example, we can combine the adjective listo with both ser and estar. We can say, Clara es lista. Clara está lista. Now, Clara es lista means that Clara is intelligent. Here we're talking about her intellect, whereas Clara está lista means Clara is ready. This can simply mean she's ready to go out for dinner. Now, another example, we can combine bueno with ser and estar. We can say, él es bueno. Él está bueno. Again, the meaning change here is hard to predict. Él es bueno means he is a good person. Él está bueno means he is really attractive physically. Now, with listo, we could argue that maybe there is a permanent and temporary thing happening, but for me, a temporary form of intelligence wouldn't be readiness or vice versa. And then same with bueno, a temporary form of being a good person is attractiveness. This doesn't work for me logically, right? And we could argue that, say for George Clooney or Brad Pitt, that their attractiveness is a fairly permanent feature. So I hope you can see with these examples that the key is to let go of logic as much as possible and simply practice each sentence as you build your knowledge of these verbs. Now, also there are situations where we could apply a rule like permanent or temporary, but it doesn't tell us about a strange grammatical change. For example, when it comes to profession, we can generally use ser, but we can also use estar. For example, I'm an architect, but for now, I'm working as a waiter. Soy arquitecto, pero por ahora estoy de camarero. Now, with this example, we can see that the real key here is the preposition de. Estoy de camarero. Now, we can't say estoy camarero. And if we wanted to search for logic here, we could argue that I'm working as a waiter. Estoy trabajando de camarero. And then we can think in Spanish, it's fine to drop trabajando. Estoy de camarero. Now, all of that said, a similar thing happens with variable pricing, but with a different preposition. So if you want to talk about the price of something, the price of the table is 400 pesos. El precio de la mesa es 400 pesos. But then in a marketplace where we can find variable prices for, say, vegetables, fruit, and meat, you might hear the fish today is 50 pesos. El pescado hoy está a 50 pesos. So again, while permanent and temporary kind of work as a simplification here, it doesn't tell us that we need to use the preposition a. So as you can see, ser and estar is quite a complex topic, and the best way to learn ser and estar is to avoid the temptation to simplify it. When we try to simplify it into a few rules, we run into lots of examples that seem to break the rules. But it also trains our brains to try to solve language sentences like a mathematical problem, which will slow us down. Instead, if we can think of ser and estar, like make and do in English, where there are lots of patterns that we have to get used to over time, then it can make the process of learning these verbs much more effective. Moreover, I often work with beginner or intermediate students that feel like they should have mastered ser and estar by now. But I can tell you that I'm still learning new things about ser and estar myself after studying Spanish for 20 years. And in our Spanish school, we revisit and add more complex patterns with ser and estar at all 4 levels. So I don't want you to feel like this is a topic that you should have mastered by now. Instead, it's a topic that you can continue to get better at as you improve your knowledge of the Spanish language. But for now, there are several uses of ser and estar that you can practice and get used to after watching this video. ¿Dónde es la fiesta? ¿Dónde está la fiesta? Es por ahí. Está por ahí. Él está muerto. Es listo. Está listo. Es bueno. Está bueno. Soy arquitecto. Estoy de camarero. Es 400 pesos. Está a 50 pesos. So now you know what all of these mean. So just practice these sentences over and over. Now I know it's easier said than done, but try not to fit them into a logic framework. Forget trying to learn the rules. and instead just practice these patterns. Now, as always, if you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe if you aren't already. Also, let me know in the comments what you thought of this video and if you have any other questions. Until next time, habla mejor, entiende más.